genotype is. Okay, that's kind of like Social Security number. You want to know your genotype because there may be clinical trials that are targeting certain types of mutations, certain specific mutations, or certain types of mutations, and it's in your best interest to know what they are and what they mean. There is a website, the Johns Hopkins CFTR2 website, which is actually constructed not only for doctors and researchers, but also for patients and families. There's a patient and family side to that. So if you just type in CFTR2, do a Google search, you'll find this. And this is just an example of how it would walk you through. You put in your the designation, and it gives you a kind of a review of what's out there, how do patients generally do with the mutation, and what type of mutation it is. Now, there are going to be some rare mutations that aren't even well described in CFTR2, and we still want to try to come up with strategies for treatment. And if you look at this slide here, it has some little mini movies here. Did you notice that the cell on this side is growing? It's swelling. Well, one of the things that Dr. Sears was talking about is CFTR, one of its major functions is it controls the movement of salt and water. And when you get salt and water moving into a cell, it blows up like a balloon. So this is showing activation of wild-type CFTR with a CFTR activator called forskolin. And here is a cell, a similar cell, with the CF defect. And you can see that it doesn't swell. Now, wouldn't it be interesting if we could harvest some cells from a patient and test a battery of different compounds rather than subjecting them to pills that they might take for several months and wonder, is this working or not working? Because as you know, there's always a chance that you don't have an exacerbation anyway, whether you're on the med or not. So you'd like to know, is this medication actually affecting the mutation that we're interested in? And so this is a line of research using intestinal organospheres. Basically, they can harvest some cells from the patient's body, grow them up in a petri dish, and then test a range of different compounds. So once we have a portfolio of compounds that are available, we can customize it to the patient. Very exciting. This is another way of looking at it. These are these organoids, and you can see that there's a stepladder of response, and it seems to be very specific to CFTR, because here we can see adding different compounds, we get an increase in response, and then if we give a CFTR inhibitor, it blocks it. So we can test in these in vitro systems. So we can take cells from the patient or cell lines that are grown up with the same mutation as the patient and test these compounds ex vivo before subjecting the person to the medication. So we've talked a lot today about treatment with these molecular modifiers. And where we're getting at treatment for these people, well, standardized care is continuous therapy. And Emily can tell you more about that than I can, but it's not just taking a pill. For most people, it's 2 to 3 hours a day. Okay, so that's very burdensome. Now we're moving towards daily therapy with pills, with the protein translation treatment. Those are medications like Kalydeco or Orkambi. And then you start getting into more futuristic looks at actually trying to repair the genetic underpinnings of the disease. So these would be looking at permanent repairs or periodic treatments with genetic therapies that might be more effective than what we were seeing in the 1990s. And here's the problem that we ran into in the 1990s. I'm just going to recap this. Most of the genetic therapy was done with adenoviruses, which are like cold viruses that would carry a normal copy of the CFTR. We were giving the virus through a bronchoscope into the lung. We were spraying it in and then trying to see how long the cells survive. The problem is that the lining cells of the lung slough off periodically, so that you had to keep redosing the medicine. And our bodies don't like to see adenovirus, so the second time you give it, there would be antibodies that would inactivate the virus. So these are some of the big problems, is that the half-life is very short, and our bodies build up an immune response. What came out this past year in Lancet Respiratory Medicine is a different strategy using something called liposomes. These are naked pieces of DNA that are in little loops, and they're held in a fat globule. That's what a liposome is. And they would spray that into the patients. And now we're starting to see, this is a similar graph to what you may have seen at other CF education days, where we're looking at changes in predicted FEV1. And again, like Dr. Sears would say, this is by no means is this a home run. I would say this is a bunt single. But you're seeing that in the placebo-treated group, there's a drop in lung function, and there's a stabilization, maybe a slight rise at times with the liposomal treatment. But what's kind of exciting here is we're actually seeing expression of wild-type CFTR in cells that are harvested from the patients. And this is a Herculean task to do this study. It was an international study that had a paragraph worth of investigators on the paper. So what's even more futuristic is actually looking at stem cells. And in our household, it seems like the answer to every question is, oh, do it with a laser. So lasers are cool, stem cells are cool, I guess. But it isn't actually so far-fetched that stem cells might be used at some point to treat CF. And what the strategy that's being looked at by a lot of scientific groups currently is to actually take mature cells from the host, so take some skin cells, and actually revert them back to pluripotent cells that can then be differentiated again into whether you want it to be a lung cell or a bowel cell. And those things can actually be done now in the laboratory. They're being done on mice. There are some very exciting, and I hate to say that I get some of my information about CF by reading Popular Science, but there was actually an article in Popular Science looking at this CRISPR technique that is fascinating. It all started by studying bacteria and finding that these bacteria had incredible systems for using a scissor-like molecular system to just clip out pieces of DNA and insert them in other areas. So we now have molecular scissors to cut out a normal CFTR and splice it in to the chromosome of somebody who's deficient. So proof of principle, we can now do it. It's now ramping it up to animal models and humans. But that's something to think about in the future. And here's an example of doing this regenerative lung biology in mice. And so as long as you have the scaffolding appropriately designed to accept these stem cells, the stem cells will actually grow into new lung tissue with the air sacs and everything else. It's amazing. Now, does the CF Foundation care about this? We've been hearing a lot about these molecular techniques, but I just want to assure everybody that some of this money that Ted was just talking about that's come into the CF Foundation is being reinvested into some of these long-term goals to try to get long-term, one-time cures for CF. So there are grants available for looking at CFTR gene replacement and repair technologies. There's another one looking at research tools and therapeutics, and a stem cell application through the CF Foundation. So you're bringing in some of the smartest scientists around the country who are interested in doing stem cell biology. They're actually being welcomed into the basic research community in CF. Very exciting. All right. Now, I told you at the beginning of the talk about personalized care. What's the difference between precision care and personalized care? And I spent most of my talk talking about precision care, trying to do targeted treatment to genetic defects. But I think our job as CF care teams is much bigger than that. That's one of the reasons I left the lab to go to work with patients, is that I like being at the bedside and I like knowing the people or getting to know the people that I'm taking care of. So personalized care, I think beyond just finding the right medication, is looking at some of these other things. It's trying to reduce the fragmentation of care so that the medical record makes sense to more people. It's minimizing the length of time in the hospital. It's bringing in people with unique talents so that we have a multidisciplinary care. It's not just doctor, nurse, and patient, but we have a whole team. It's continually reassessing the quality of life, establishing the goals of care, and then respecting individual choice. We have some people, for religious reasons or whatever, who don't want some of the stuff. And we need to know them well enough to know when to back off. So here's my one I guess, my second cartoon. So some of you may not be able to see this, but this is Calvin and Hobbes, and Calvin says, "I'm at peace with the world, I'm completely serene." And Hobbes says, "Why is that?" "I've discovered my purpose in life. I know why I was put here and why everything exists." "Oh, really?" "Yes, I'm here so everybody can do what I want." "It's nice to have cleared that up," says Hobbes. And then Calvin says, "Once everyone accepts it, they'll be serene too." So on a more serene note, this is my most daring slide here. I was thinking sometimes we can get inspired, certainly I get inspired by looking around in nature and seeing how can we learn deeper lessons about how we live our life, or deeper understanding of what really is meaningful in life. And when you look at a substance, if you look at gold or you look at silver or coal, the smallest individual unit within that substance is a what? This is the quiz. It's an atom. An atom, right? So we think of the smallest piece of a substance being an atom. But actually, if you look at an atom, and so if we look in society, the smallest unit in society is a what? A person. So if we just look at one aspect of a person, just that they're a body that has chemicals, and then we need to fix the chemicals, we may be missing a deeper truth. Same thing in an atom. An atom is actually, if you look on a periodic table, for those of you who took some chemistry, what describes an atom, we've got some different parts here. You got the proton in there. The protons actually describe what the atom is going to look like when it's in a big clump. So you've got either gold or coal has a certain number of protons in it. But an atom is not just protons. It's got neutrons in it too, right? So if you look around the room, we've got different people. They look different. All right, we got Mother Teresa, we got Arnold Schwarzenegger. They look different on the outside, and they're characterized by their body types. But if we want to treat them more holistically, let's think of if you add extra neutrons to an atom, what happens to it? It becomes radioactive. It becomes unstable. So I think of that like the mental state of somebody. So we have the body, and then you get the mental state of somebody. And if they're not mentally, they may look the same on the outside, but on the inside they're really hurting. And so our complete personalized care should really address the mental state of the patient. And at the CF Foundation actually put out a grant to support mental health care in adult patients. And we scrambled to apply for that, and we were very happy that we got that grant. So I don't know, Meg, if you want to wave, but Meg is going to be our mental health coordinator. So I see that that's a critical thing. We can prescribe whatever we want. If the person is completely depressed, they're not going to take it. The third piece, which is probably even a little bit more controversial here, is that the outer part of the atom is the electron. That's the part that you almost don't pay attention to because the electron doesn't weigh anything, or weighs very little. But it allows atoms to combine. That's how they form molecules, is through the electron cloud. And so for us, I call this the spirit. If our spiritual foundation is kind of messed up and we're not connecting with other people, it's easy to get really isolated. And CF is one of the most isolating diseases there is because of infection control. People can feel very alone. So if we're not addressing the spiritual needs of our patients, again, we're not providing true personalized care. So now this is a little bit of a stretch, but social work, I think, really is a key part of that, particularly for adults when they're going through marriage, when they're going through facing a transplant, when they're going through perhaps end-of-life decision-making. Having a social worker and a palliative care specialist is critically important, and we applied for monies to help with social work, and I'm very happy to say that we're finally getting approaching the amount of FTE or dedicated time for social work on our teams to address these things. Okay, so how are we going to address the three key aspects of personhood that I think are critically important for personalized care? We want to stay on the cutting edge of medical therapy for CF and participate in clinical trials so that people in Maine know that we're getting the very best of standardized care and opportunities to participate in finding the curative approaches to this disease. We want to initiate mental health screening program and develop resources for treatment. And these are all kind of visionary things, but we're on the launch pad right now to do that. And then thirdly, we want to work to meet the emotional and spiritual needs of our patients and families. And again, it's a big, we're setting big goals here, but I think we're on the launching pad. So I'd like to thank, this was going to be kind of a where are we going with CF research. CF research actually involves our clinical teams. You can see our clinical teams are growing, and the adult team used to be about that big for a long time. It's really the adult team is really growing. And then on the research side, we have, actually, you probably don't know so many people are involved in clinical research. So if you have a clinical research appointment, show up, because there are a lot of people involved in this. But we have the buy-in from folks at the Maine Medical Center Research Institute. I knew I was going to forget somebody, but our colleagues up in Bangor, Erica Parker, has been really helpful for recruiting patients, and we're now starting to get patients from Bangor participating in our clinical research. That is a huge hit with the CF Foundation, I should tell you. It's not only important for us to know that our research opportunities are available to everybody in Maine, but it actually resonates down at the foundation in Washington, because they don't like to think that there are people out in rural areas who don't have access. 2 websites that you would want to check out to learn about opportunities for research, and also I would love to load up some of these exercise videos. We're actually trying to get some video. We actually have some video content on the website, but we want to enhance that. So there's the Northern New England .org website, and then there's the CF Family Advisory Board website. So with that, I'm going to open up to questions. I think I might have run over a little bit, but thank you very much. Appreciate it.